I'm Jeff Hunt. He's Bill Thorpe, and it's Wednesday. $710 KNUS in Denver.
AM 1460 and FM 101.1, The Answer, Colorado Springs.
All along the Front Range, this is the Jeff and Bill Show where you hear both sides. Colorado families facing a $300,000 medical debt after a canine officer attacked a toddler, maimed her father. CBS News reporting on the story. After a canine officer attacked a 2-year-old and maimed her father, a Colorado family says they're facing hundreds of thousands in medical debt with no help from the county. The Dean family says they were celebrating their twins' birthday in the backyard of their Castle Rock home in August of 2024 when the canine jumped the fence and attacked. It was the twins' birthday party in our fenced backyard. It was a perfect day, just celebrating our babies, said the children's father, Nick Dean. The canine began to jump over the fence. I noticed immediately and yelled at the dog. That dog was Ragnar, a Jefferson County Sheriff's Department canine who lived with his handler, Deputy Zachary Oliver, next door. Dean says he sprang into action to protect his family and guests. I was up here on our upper porch, and I sprinted down the stairs and essentially met the dog after the dog had attacked my daughter, Lily. And he dragged her across the grass in the backyard. And from there was 3 men, myself, and 2 others that jumped on the dog. The fight didn't go well for the men. We were losing, Dean admitted. The fight continued while his 2-year-old daughter, Lily, was still being attacked by Ragnar. I couldn't pull Lily, for she was still in his mouth, said Dean's sister, Rachel DeWolf. When I was wrestling the dog, I could hear the cracking of her femur bone.
Oh, jeez.
Dean and Lily were taken to the hospital with severe injuries. 1 year later, in August of 2025, a 6-person jury in Douglas County found Oliver not guilty of misdemeanor charges of harboring a dangerous dog. And according to Judicial District Attorney, 23rd Judicial District Attorney George Brauchler, and the former attorneys for the Dean's family, Oliver's defense argued he was not responsible for the attack because at the time the dog got away, Oliver was inside cleaning urine from the dog's kennel, which was in the performance of his duties. A section of Colorado law grants protection to law enforcement regarding the actions of canines when they're acting in the capacity of their duties. That's all it took. Cleaning up pee. And then immunity. Well, what's the family been going through? How are they dealing with all of this? We're going to talk directly with the dad coming up and George Brauchler this hour. You're not going to want to miss it. But first, the news.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
Good morning. It is hump day. 60 and clear, 58 in the Springs. Expecting a high of 88 today. News sponsored by Pastor Camp Heating and Air Conditioning. For a new home heating and cooling system, contact your Lennox dealer, Pastor Camp Heating and Air Conditioning at pastorcamp.com. Conditions apply. See dealer for details. Our top story: police investigating a shooting that left 2 teens dead in Lakewood. 18-year-old Urbilis Gutierrez Arenas and an unidentified 16-year-old boy were found dead in the 1200 block of Benton Street Monday morning. Investigators believe the shooting may be a murder-suicide. Montana police say 8 people are dead after a gunman opened fire at a house in Billings and then set on fire. Police say a woman and her 4 children, parents, and grandmother were found dead Sunday night at a house in East Billings. A man who was found outside the home with a self-inflicted gunshot wound, died later at the hospital. A U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter went down during a training exercise in Gilpin County on Tuesday morning. Officials say 4 people were on board and no one was injured. The incident happened near Thorndon Mountain, and authorities say that there were no fuel leaks, fires, or danger to the surrounding community. The cause remains under investigation. 2 CSP troopers are recovering after that shooting in Teller County. Investigators say the trooper was shot after pulling over a vehicle on Highway 24 Tuesday morning. The suspect wounded a second trooper while trying to drive away. The suspect was shot and killed by law enforcement a short time later. CSP Colonel Matthew Packard.
The suspect vehicle approached in the opposite direction, moving back towards Highway 24. And as the suspect vehicle was passing, our trooper shot, he opened fire again and struck our trooper as he was in his car.
The CBI is leading the investigation. Denver homeowners could soon be banned from using their lawn sprinklers. Denver Board of Water Commissioners is set to vote on new drought response rules today.
This year, because of water supply conditions and the increasing drought, we really have to make a rule to get as much savings as we can.
A proposal under consideration would ban the use of sprinklers after September 30th, with exceptions for public parks and athletic facilities. Let's see. Colorado leaders paying tribute to Dolly Parton. Governor Polis created Parton, called Parton an inspiration to millions of Coloradans and mourning the loss of her talents. Talked about her creativity and love for life. The mayor of Denver called Parton a national treasure, noting that thousands of children around Colorado will benefit from her Imagination Library program. President Trump has ordered American flags to be lowered at half-staff to honor Dolly. She was 80 years old, of course. The Douglas County School District Board of Education has unanimously voted to add a $54 million mill levy override measure to the November ballot. If approved, homeowners in Douglas County would pay an additional $33.70 per year for every $100,000 of their home's value. Once again, the Broncos take on the Vikings on Friday at Mile High, and they signed defensive end Ron Stone, and they let go of Hakeem Butler. Rockies over the Nationals 3-1, 4:45 today on the East Coast, and I will have number 3 in my top college football entrances coming up at 9 o'clock in a couple of hours. 58 in the Springs, 60 in Denver. That is the latest. I'm Blake Olson. More of the Jeff and Bill Show ahead on News Talk 710, KNUS in Denver, and now on AM 1460 and FM 101.1. The Answer in the Springs. This is where you hear both sides. We are the Jeff and Bill Show.
It'll be a very nice and rather seasonal Wednesday here across the Denver metro area. Average high and low this time of the year is in the mid-80s and upper 50s. We're going to be looking at mid to maybe an upper 80 today. Enough energy and enough atmospheric moisture that we will see some scattered strong to possibly even a few severe thunderstorms, most of which, though, should hold off until probably after the Rockies matinee game today. Temperatures tonight under partially clearing skies near 60. Back to near 90 for a high Thursday, mostly dry. Hot and mostly dry Saturday, highs mid-90s. I'm meteorologist Mark Hewer.
710 KNUS in Denver.
AM 1460, FM 101.1, The Answer, Colorado Springs.
All along the Front Range, this is the Jeff and Bill Show where you hear both sides. A Colorado family's facing $300,000 in medical debt after a canine officer attacks a toddler, maims her father. This is a gut-wrenching story. A canine officer attacked a 2-year-old and maimed her father. A Colorado family says they are facing now hundreds of thousands in medical debt with no help from the county. CBS News reporting the Dean family says they were just celebrating their twin's birthday in the backyard of their Castle Rock home in August of 2024 when the canine jumped the fence and attacked. Oh, Bill, I can't this is like nightmare fuel. Right? You're sitting there celebrating, families all having a good time, and your 2-year-old is attacked by not like a poodle, but like a canine officer.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's not only is it a larger dog that has that is more aggressive, is good at this kind of a thing, but then also trained for it.
Trained to take down 300-pound drug dealers.
Oh yeah, and the part that scares me the most, based on being a father, is this happens in your own backyard. I mean, that is a next level of trauma to not only the family, but the little girl. There's a point where if it's out in a park, if it's in public, it's not okay, but it doesn't have the same level, in my mind, of deep scars. Yeah. This 2-year-old now has this traumatic experience that is directly connected to 2 things that are important in her life. 1, birthdays, especially her parties. Yeah. 2, connected to the safety and security she should be feeling at home because she was attacked in her backyard. If this is a girl that grows up later on in life and always feels a little unsure and unsafe in your home, this is part of the causation. This incident, this has got ripple effects in her life and the family's life. They're going to be felt for decades. This is awful.
The dad is on the upper porch. He says he sprinted down the stairs, essentially met the dog after the dog had attacked his daughter, Lily, dragged her across the grass in the backyard, and from there, 3 men jumped in on top of the dog, and that couldn't stop him. The fight didn't go well. We were losing, he admits. The fight continued while his 2-year-old daughter, Lily, was still being attacked by Ragnar. I couldn't pull Lily away, for she was still in his mouth, says Dean's sister. And when I was wrestling the dog, I could hear the cracking of her femur bone.
Yeah, that's scary. That's awful.
All right. They went and tried to prosecute all this, and it didn't go well. Jeffco said they were going to try to cover the costs. They never did. This family now facing $300,000 in medical debt. To tell us the story of what happened and everything they've gone through is the father himself, Nick Dean. He joins us this morning. Good morning, Nick. Thank you for joining the Jeff and Bill Show.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning, Jeff. Good morning, Bill. Thank you guys so much for having us on to tell a story.
Well, first of all, how's Lily doing these days? This has been nearly 2 years. Is she doing okay?
Yeah, thankfully, Lily's doing really well. We recently had her scans redone by her doctor, and the doctor believes that she's not going to have any long-term mobility issues or growth issues, just these 4 big, beautiful scars on her legs.
Wow. Well, I'm glad she's doing okay. I'm so sorry for what your family had to do. I think hearing from your perspective what happened that day would be helpful. Walk our listeners through what you all were doing, what you went through, and then we'll get to what happened afterwards. But let's start with that day.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was August 11th, 2024. It was their 2-year-old birthday party for our twins, Ollie and Lily, and we're just surrounded by friends and family in our fenced backyard. We had over a dozen small children running around, and we were barbecuing. We had just finished cutting the cake, watching the kids tear into it from their little booster seats. And it was right around that time that I saw Ragnar start to climb our 5-foot fence. And, I knew Ragnar was dangerous, knew that he was a weapon, knew that he was a tool, and he shouldn't have been out of his cage. And so myself and a couple of the parents became aware of it pretty quickly. And as soon as Ragnar could jump over the fence, sorry. As soon as Ragnar jumped over the fence, he went for Lily, and he bit into her leg and ripped her down to the grass, and basically just started, in the words of some of the parents there, just whipping her around like a rag doll. And I was upstairs, and I was able to meet Ragnar with my hands in its jaws, and myself and two other men jumped on the dog, and we all just started pulling just as hard as we could, and just screaming as loud as we could, hoping somebody might come help us. And it was then that I could hear, my daughter's femur. They tried to tell me when they put me on the stand during the criminal proceedings that, I didn't know what I heard with her femur. I'm not a doctor, but I am a dad. And so shortly after the dog was restrained, myself and my daughter were taken in separate ambulances from the birthday party to the hospital. And that concluded the birthday party.
How long did you guys stay in the hospital? What was the extent of the injuries?
We were at the hospital late into the night. Lily's injuries were extensive. Again, for a 2-year-old, a femur break is just an insane amount of force to make that happen. She had lacerations all across her chest from Ragnar just mauling her when he first grabbed at her. For myself, my injuries were extensive, but we really didn't know the extent at the time. Ragnar had gotten onto the back of my bicep and bit into my arm pretty good. However, the bigger injuries were to my neck and my chest and my back when I was holding on to Ragnar and he started to get away and got onto the back of my arm. We were still surrounded by so many kids, and I knew that the consequence would be fatal if we let go. And so when Ragnar bit onto the back of my arm, I rotated so quickly, and just every muscle in my body was just flexing at that time, trying to just grapple. I tore my chest, and just the sheer force of landing on the dog from essentially upstairs when I sprinted down on it, I landed on my side, on my back, and I've just dealt, unfortunately, with chronic pain ever since that. I haven't been able to work out in 2 years. I was extremely active before that, climbing mountains, and I was in between doing 8,000 foot elevation climbs on some trips, and all that went away, after that injury. And so we've just been working to get my health back since then.
That's Nick Dean. He's the father and victim of a dog attack. His 2-year-old attacked by this Jeffco canine officer that jumped the fence. Now, he was your neighbor, Zachary Oliver, deputy with Jefferson County Sheriffs. Did you know Zachary Oliver? Had you interacted with his dog Ragnar in the past?
Jackie's family were a bit more reserved. We didn't have a ton of interaction with them. We were friendly as neighbors. And again, I knew Ragnar was a tool, knew he was a weapon, and there were signs everywhere, stay away from the dog. So it's not like we had a relationship with Ragnar.
And then there's this whole effort that begins, led by George Brauchler, friend of the show. I mean, we took over the show. He used to sit in my seat here. Judicial District 23 district attorney to prosecute Zachary Oliver in light of the fact that he was supposed to be responsible for this dog. And walk us through the criminal prosecution effort that took place and the result of that case.
Yeah, so we really had no idea of the significance of the criminal case. After the attack, we were assured by parties on both ends that we were going to get taken care of, so we really had no real concern. And we weren't necessarily out for blood. We knew mistakes were made, And we just wanted to move on with our life. And so you're correct in that George was part of the prosecution team for that. And yeah, it was brutal, as a father to sit in the stands and just hear over and over again that he was just doing his job and basically no big deal, not his problem, not the sheriff's department's problem. I remember taking the stand and having his lawyer accuse me of my injuries only took place because I intervened to my daughter. I remember looking at the judge and looking at the lawyer and just jaw drop and just asking him to repeat the question, because I thought surely I misheard that, and if I didn't mishear that, he needs to repeat himself, and surely he doesn't have kids to ask that question
or a soul. I mean, all honesty. I mean, to look at a father that is having to view his 2-year-old daughter be attacked by a dog that has been trained to do this in the backyard, and the temerity of a lawyer to say, well, it's your fault because you stopped the attack. The problem that I have with that, and this is where it's good that I was not in the courtroom nor on the stand at the time. I don't think I could compose myself as you did, Nick. That's where I would have started asking the lawyer, is your expectation of me to watch my child die? Is that what you're telling me is the better mode of action? That in order to do this properly, I should have watched the dog tear my daughter apart. And I probably would not have said it in that calm of a way. It would not have been good. That would have been one of the things where the judge would have been talking to me and trying to throw me out of the court. Now, the question I've got for you, Nick, now, Jeff will take this in a different direction in a second, but based on your knowledge and understanding, what sort of steps or what did you know about the officer next door, Deputy Zachary Oliver, and how he stored and cared for the canine? And the reason I ask this, and George will outline this a little bit later, and I'm not a lawyer, I just play one on the radio at times and very badly, but there are some rules and liabilities for law enforcement officers based on safe storage of their weapons. They're not held to the same standard that a private individual is. However, if the officer leaves a weapon in an unsecured location or something like that, and it's taken and used, or something happens, the officer can be held liable. What I'm real curious about is understanding how Ragnar is trained and how Ragnar responds to certain types of stimuli. Was that tool safe and secure? I think there's a level of responsibility there on the officer's part. Did you see anything, or did you have any exposure to how the officer that was living next door to you with this canine, Deputy Zachary Oliver, what was his process procedure? Do you have any indications on his storage or the idea of making sure that he maintained control over the dog, just in your experience with him?
Well, first of all, I just want to say when we moved into that house, we were so grateful that we were next door to a sheriff. We thought we'd struck the lottery. It was going to be the safest neighborhood ever. Little did we know. And to your point, we've wrestled with that because, number one, we had zero prior knowledge as to what specs the cage met, who approved it, if it was approved by the HOA, if it was vetted by the sheriff's department. We really had no idea. The only thing I know about the cage is from the body camera footage of Zach explaining how he thinks his dog lifted the cage latch and let himself out with his nose. And so, again, we had no prior knowledge. And really just could have been any family in the neighborhood.
Given the party going on next door, that's a stimulant for the dog.
That's exactly right. And he was able to get out of prosecution because this Jeffco officer claimed he was doing the work of police work, peace officer duties, because he was cleaning up the pee. So he props open the door. He leaves the cage door open. The dog runs free, but because the canine officer handler said he was cleaning up he was doing peace officer duties, off the hook. No responsibility. Did this police officer, did this sheriff deputy from Jeffco ever apologize?
Unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because he came over, right after the attack, and then he proceeded to follow our family to the hospital and came into my room before I'd been able to see my daughter or my wife, not even once since she had been attacked. And he just kept telling me in tears how sorry he was and how, he was going to make it right. And he has daughters and, in hindsight, just thinking on the things that Zach shared that day, the things Zach shared on the body cam footage, as well as what the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department publicly shared in the news, or their public's release statement. It was all empty words, they all felt bad, but not enough to actually do anything about it.
So he apologizes in the room, but you don't get any official apologies from Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. They don't help you with any of the medical bills at all?
Well, we already kind of, to be honest, knew it was headed in this direction. And you're right, they haven't helped at all. And the reason I say we knew it was headed in this direction, and kind of to go back to court, when all this happened leading up to court, like I said, we were never out to ruin Zach's life. We understand that accidents happen. They couldn't undo what happened that day, but the way they responded was absolutely within their control. And the first thing, they did is they shared that they were going to do everything they could to support the family. However, they allowed Zach to keep Ragnar at the house for 8 or 9 months after the fact of the accident. And so we were literal prisoners in our own home. And I remember a couple weeks, and this is a hard story to share, but a couple weeks after the attack, I had come home and lifted up the garage door, and my wife was just sitting on the ground, just in tears, just full panic, because she had let the kids in the backyard to play, not knowing that the sheriff's department was still allowing Zach to keep that monster in the backyard. And I would sit at the top of my stairs and just stare at it, just wanting to be a guard of the house and make sure it didn't get out again. And I remember I got a text from Zach saying that, "Don't worry, he's always with me or locked up." And I thought, like last time, and again, going into court, it was fully evident that their words were empty. They had a lot of control over the situation, and they had chosen to do nothing. So when we found out recently, towards the end of my statutes of limitations, that they weren't going to provide any support for our medical bills whatsoever, it's not their policy to spend taxpayer dollars, is what they said. We realized we were on the hook by ourselves.
To the tune of $300,000, folks. $300,000. There's so much that's wrong with this. They're living next door to a Cujo. Yeah. And they just have to deal with it. I mean, there's no responsibility from Jefferson County sheriffs. I mean, this is, if you're going to spend taxpayer dollars on anything, it should be to support the family attacked unjustly by a member of the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, which is what the K-9 is. And instead of helping them, they've left this family out there. This is lawyers doing their thing, all that, building walls and protecting.
I think what I want everyone that is listening to the show and listening to the words coming out of Nick Dean's mouth and the emotion and the trauma that his family has experienced is, when you're thinking about the Jefferson County Sheriff and how they've handled this situation, remember what Nick Dean said just a couple minutes ago. He said that obviously the Jefferson County Sheriffs and Deputy Zachary Oliver did not control the attack, but they do have control over the response. They have 100% agency with how they deal with this afterwards, and that reveals a lot. as you heard from Nick, he and his family are traumatized by the attack. They're not turning around, and you didn't hear anger to him, and I know there's frustration towards Deputy Oliver, but he didn't sit there and say he made this and he did this and he made sure that dog could attack. He didn't. But where the frustration is, where this is as the family's trying to put the pieces of their lives back together. Remember, the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department didn't control the attack, but they have 100% control over their response. And what are they doing and not doing?
Well, there's a way we can respond. We have 100% control. We have the best listeners in Denver. There's a GoFundMe up to support the Dean family after this police canine attack. I've linked to it at x.com/Jeff Hunt, x.com/Jeff Hunt. Support the Dean family after a violent police canine attack. They're looking to raise $300,000. They've raised $80,000 to this point, so over a quarter, which is great. This is such a sweet family. And little Lily is so adorable. Okay? Nicole and I have donated. I'm going to encourage our listeners, go support this sweet family. We're going to have George Brauchler on next. We're going to talk about how we can maybe change this law so this never happens again to another Colorado family left out in the cold.
Yeah.
To deal with the medical costs as a result of this canine attack. It's totally unacceptable. Nick, text messages strongly in support of you. First one, 7903 says, first off, Nick, you are a hero. Never forget that. And second, shame on Jeffco for the response. I think that's how a lot of Coloradans would feel. Nick Dean, please give our best to your family.
Yes.
We're glad that Lily's going to recover and go on to live a healthy life, but we're so sorry for what you went through. But thank you for taking time to join the Jeff and Bill Show to tell your story.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Cannot thank you enough for the time you gave us.
Thanks so much for having us on, guys. Really appreciate you.
Again, you can support the Dean family. Go to my X account, x.com/Jeff Hunt. It's right there at the top. Support the Dean family. And that sweet little girl. She's beautiful little girl, Lily. Golly. All right, so George prosecuted the case. Tried to.
Yeah, tried to. That's the important part.
We're going to get into the law that is preventing the prosecution of what should be a slam dunk case in my mind. We're going to talk with George next. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710, KNUS in Denver.
AM 1460, FM 101.1, The Answer, Colorado Springs. This is where you hear both sides, the Jeff and Bill Show.
710 KNUS in Denver.
AM 1460, FM 101.1, The Answer, Colorado Springs.
All along the Front Range, this is the Jeff and Bill Show, where you hear both sides. We just wrapped up our conversation with Nick Dean, the father of a dog attack victim, himself in Jefferson County. And there's this bizarre loophole that has allowed the Jeffco sheriff to get off in this canine attack. That basically, if you're doing anything in the service of law enforcement, you're clear, apparently. So even if cleaning up the pee of your canine dog while the dog jumps a fence and attacks an innocent 2-year-old, you're clear. Don't worry. You're not going to be criminally charged on this. To talk to us about this loophole is a man who sought to prosecute. District Attorney for Judicial District 23, George Brauchler. George, thanks for taking time to join us this morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Thanks for having me on, guys. And I appreciate you trying to weave through the nuance of what the law allows me to do. Before you ask a question, can I just set this up for listeners because they won't get it. The law in Colorado says that if somebody is accused of a crime and that crime is either dismissed or they're acquitted of it, and it ultimately is sealed by the court, that the only thing a person like me could do is to say, I don't know of such a case. I can't even acknowledge its past existence, despite my public comments at the time before it was sealed. I can talk in hypotheticals. I can tell you about what's wrong with this law. But in terms of a case that you may or may not have spoken with a guy about in the past, I can't even acknowledge it exists.
I understand that. I will speak on the behalf of the Dean family, who I did speak to, who said they sure appreciate you, 100%, and appreciate the work that you did. Nick told me that yesterday. All right, so let's talk about this loophole in general. This loophole exists in the law that basically says if you're engaged in peace officer duties, well then, no problem. Bill brought up a great point. If guns were just getting up and walking around and shooting people, and you're the one that owned the gun, you would say, hey, stop allowing those guns to walk around and shoot people. Take some responsibility. What is with this loophole that exists here? Your thoughts, George Brauchler?
First off, there's a law out there that applies apparently to all of us except law enforcement canine handlers. And by the way, after I made some public comments about a case I can't acknowledge, I had friends who are canine handlers who were really disappointed in my comments because they think it gives the wrong message about these trained dogs and that they're not trained killers. And I acknowledge that, but that's not what this issue is. The issue here is, Jeff, if your dog got off your property and let's just say hypothetically attacked your neighbor, broke your neighbor's arm or something like that, that's a dangerous dog. And if you're convicted of that, of harboring a dangerous dog, that dog is destroyed. This dog, in a law enforcement capacity, would never be destroyed. And here's why. And I'm going to read you the language. The provisions of this section, and they're talking about the law on harboring a dangerous dog, shall not apply to any dog that is used by a peace officer while the officer is engaged in the performance of peace officer duties. Now, here's where it gets cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Anybody on the planet Earth would interpret that to be something that tries to protect officers when they're using the dog in law enforcement duties. So, for instance, if dogs are conducting some sort of crowd control or they're doing a sweep of a school for drugs or something, or maybe they're even there to chase down a suspect, you don't want to create a situation where the officer could be prosecuted for the dog doing something in that capacity. And I think we'd all agree, okay, that makes total sense. This law apparently applies to anything that you can define as peace officer duties. So, for instance, these canine officers are paid extra money that other officers aren't to care for these dogs. And that money is paid out to them typically in like monthly installments. That single provision, according to some people who may have testified in a hypothetical case from the agency where this guy could or could not have been, say that that's enough to call it peace officer duties. So, and I'll give you a hypothetical. Canine officer is supposed to care for the dog. They take the dog for a walk down the street. Also going down the street is a woman with her infant in a baby carriage. and they're pushing the stroller around. And for whatever reason, I'm not saying these dogs are like grenades that just go off on their own, but just for whatever reason, the dog attacks that infant. They're going to there being the law enforcement agency could play this card and say, well, they've got to care for the dog. They're taking care of the dog, and taking care of the dog they get paid for. It's in the performance of their duties. Now, keep in mind, someone who is in a jurisdiction separate from the one in which they operate has no authority to operate in that jurisdiction. So if a 911 call, if someone next door to a law enforcement officer with a canine had called 911, this person next door could not have responded in the capacity of 911 because they're not a law enforcement officer there. But if they're walking down the street and they attack a woman's child in a stroller, this particular provision is defined so broadly, and it has been defined so broadly, that it would say, I'm so sorry about your baby. Move on.
Peace officer duties. That's what it would fall under. That's George Brauchler, District Attorney of Judicial District 23, joining us. Do you think there's an appetite to address this? I mean, golly, the state capitol passes 500 laws a year. I couldn't tell you what any of them are actually doing to benefit anyone's lives. But in this case, a simple fix to narrow police officer duties or peace officer duties to actual duties in law enforcement, as opposed to walking the dog down the street and it got off the leash and attacked a child, clearly is not, from my perspective, peace officer duties. Can't we narrow that? Is there any appetite down at the state capitol to fix this, you think?
There might be, but I'll tell you, there's genuine fear from law enforcement, especially canine handlers, over this, because they're worried that once this particular left-leaning We Hate Cops legislature starts taking a look at things like liability for officers and canine officers, that they're not going to stop there. They're going to either narrow this thing to a point where these guys feel exposed and they don't want to be canine officers anymore, or they're just going to take it away altogether and turn it over to civil courts for people to be sued for every time they get a dog bite. So would this legislature take it up? I think they would, but I'm also not certain they're going to end up doing the right thing, which is to provide a definition that we can all sit here and listen to this story and say, this definition was never intended to cover something like this. By the way, I heard that for whatever case doesn't exist, that Jefferson County has said, we're just not going to spend taxpayer money on that. It's weird because I'm almost certain there was about a $250,000 contract that Jeffco gave taxpayer money to Congresswoman Brittany Pedersen's husband for something. I can't remember. I'm sure it was equally important to the injury suffered by a child for something that one of their
hell of a
government property thing. That's crazy. Point. But I guess, if it had been Brittany Pedersen's child, there might have been a different answer, but it wasn't. So that's a little bit crazy.
That is good. Now, we're talking to George Brauchler, District Attorney for a 23rd Judicial District. We are talking about the Dean family. Nick Dean joined us earlier. It's a case that George can't talk about for a variety of reasons specifically. But basically...
I don't even know what case exists.
I have no idea.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
So here, just plug your ears right now and just go la, 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 la. And so basically, the Dean family is hosting a 2-year-old party for their twin girls. K9 is next door. It's a canine officer, gets loose for a variety of reasons, comes over the fence and attacks little Lily, breaking her femur and a whole bunch of other things. Nick shared the story of that traumatic event. So based on the outline of this law, George, if we're talking about that law hypothetically, can you, myself, or Jeff create a situation or scenario where that law enforcement officer, when interacting or around that canine, is not then performing law enforcement duties? What I mean by that is, based on the broad definition of the law that you have outlined, I cannot conceive in my mind of a time where that human stands next to, near, or is even in the vicinity of that dog where they can't define it specifically as law enforcement duties. If the simple act of cleaning up the dog's pee is defined as a law enforcement duty, what sits outside of that definition?
Nothing. I mean, the way this thing has been interpreted and applied, I can conceive of nothing that would bring a law enforcement canine handler under this statute. Now, if they use the dog intentionally to cause harm to someone intentionally, that's a different statute, right? I don't think they would enjoy the same immunity here. But under this statute, the way it has been recently interpreted and embraced by Jefferson County, I can't think of anything. I mean, there's no even requirement here that the handler be operating with a certain reasonable amount of care. Do you know what I mean? Like, you could be completely negligent, maybe even reckless. There is nothing in this statute that suggests that any of that applies to a canine handler.
Ouch.
That's George Brauchler joining us, Judicial District 23. One question that's coming in on the text messages is, what prevents civil action in these cases? Not in this case in particular, but against any type of canine handler. It seems like some families out there are running into challenges, even pursuing civil remedies. What are your thoughts on that?
That's probably a Dan Kaplis question or a John Kellner question, because I'm just not that smart on the civil stuff when it applies to this. But I presume that there is some governmental immunity that exists already, and that if they can embrace another portion of the law that provides another explanation for that immunity or broader immunity, I imagine that's how it ends up getting sucked into that case. But I can't imagine. I mean, look, can I give you two other really interesting facts listeners might want to know?
Please. Because
they have nothing to do with a case that doesn't exist. One is this dog, if it was yours, mine, Billy's, whatever, it would have been destroyed for this conduct. That's what the law would have required. And there's good reason for that, right? Like, you don't give a dog a second chance to attack a kid, that kind of thing. In this case, not only was this dog not destroyed, but when a particular canine handler retired after a case that doesn't exist and moved out of state, Jeffco gave him the dog. They gave him the dog. So there's some other community out there where people are living nearby a canine handler who has a dog. But, and then the other second fact I think that's important for people to know is, did you know on the ballot this year across the state of Colorado, every sheriff is on there? Did you know that?
That's interesting.
That is interesting. No, George Brauchler, District Attorney, Judicial District 23. Billy, final question to you, sir.
Yeah, last one, George, and we're running out of time here. Yeah. This comes from someone in the audience and asking that if the officer is performing the duty of cleaning up the dog's duty at the time, how much responsibility, hypothetically, would a canine officer have to ensure the dog is secure? If that dog hypothetically escapes and attacks somebody, can we assume the officer is performing the law enforcement duty? Your example earlier of the mother and the baby in the stroller walking down the street, if the officer bends over to pick up the dog doo-doo and the dog gets off the leash and attacks the family, no harm, no foul? Is that the conclusion we have inside of this law, how it's interpreted?
Yeah, you know what that goes back to this negligence thing quickly, though. What you would need is someone from that officer's agency to come out and testify and say, that is so far outside the guidelines for what we consider to be taking care of the dog and peace officer duties. We don't think it covers that. However, if those same senior members of a sheriff's office or police department show up and testify in a hypothetical case that, nope, that fits within our officer's duties, then those jurors are stuck, because a judge is going to advise them, find these things, but if you find that he's in the performance of his duties, then he's not liable. And if those jurors sit there and hear from other senior members of a law enforcement agency he's within his duties, what then? What can you do? You're stuck. It takes an agency that is scrupulous and that doesn't put itself before the citizens it serves to make a different decision.
Strong, bold words from George Brauchler. Nobody does it better. District Attorney, Judicial District 23. George, thank you for your time today.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks, man.
All right. If you want to support the Dean family, go to x.com/Jeff Hunt. There's a GoFundMe there, and you can support this wonderful family going through such a terrible tragedy. All right, we will continue. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710, KNUS in Denver.
AM 1460 and FM 101.1, The Answer in Colorado Springs. This is the Jeff and Bill Show.